All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Nathan Litke. It's December 9th, 2025, and we're at Illahe Vineyards in Dallas. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate you having me.
First question to get things started is why wine?
It's a good question. I was thinking about that a little bit this morning, and you can gamble on everything these days, and so I was thinking about if you could open up like a DraftKings bet, like 15 years ago, you could have made some serious money betting on wine as a career for me. I think my friends from that time area are equally as surprised as I am a little bit, so kind of fell into it a little bit. But I'm from Oregon here. I was born in Connecticut, but grew up in Salem, and so this is home for me. And I went to school, and then after that, I went to school at Southern Oregon and then University of Oregon, and was just kind of looking to explore a little bit. And so I moved to Indiana, where I met my now wife, Emily, and from there was just kind of looking for some adventures. And so I got a '77 Chevy panel van that was. We had a mural on the side and shag carpet and futon inside. It was pretty awesome. And just kind of traveled around the country in that, and ended up in Colorado, where I spent 3 years whitewater raft guiding, and then bounced between Colorado and Utah, just ski bumming in the winter and then raft guiding in the summer. And that was awesome. That was like such a fun experience to be able to do in your mid-20s and early 20s. And I would encourage that so hard. And I'm going to encourage my kids to do. I mean, they don't have to do that, so they can do whatever. But like just kind of take that time and do something really fun. And that was being in the outdoors is like something that's really, really important to me. It's something kind of where I recharge. And so, and it's it's interesting, the whitewater raft guiding. That's like this. You're not really going to get that adrenaline rush, outside of your hobbies, but harvest is like the closest thing I can think of to kind of scratching that itch a little bit. So, as you get all the chaos of the equipment and your grapes coming in, and there's, you just have so many decisions that have to happen immediately. And so that, I feel like that's something that I really like about the wine industry. I get a little bit of that you get a little bit of that adrenaline in there. But yeah, so I was out there for 3 years, and then afterwards was kind of thinking about what do I want to do? This is the middle of the recession at this point, and so kind of decided I wanted to go back to school, and so I came back out to Oregon, went to the Chemeketa program, and which was a great fit for me there. I was really lucky. I got the last 2 years of Barney Watson and Al McDonald, and those guys were, they're such legends, and I was really thankful to catch them at the end of their tenure. Barney was kind of I always have his maxims in the back of my head whenever we're doing any sort of wine work, and it's funny, I'll talk with other people that were in the program at the same time, like Gabe Jagel from Snake Valley, or Bethany Kimmel from Color Collector, and we kind of all have we all have the same little idioms that we'll use that he said, and so that's I think there's what he did is kind of really shaped so much of the wine industry. But I went through there for a couple years, and then my first job in the wine industry was at Panther Creek when they were in downtown McMinnville at that point. So this was 2011, 2012, and yeah, that was my introduction to wine. But really, I came in so green into the wine industry. I think about that now, especially as you meet so many people that are coming in, and people come in with, especially for their first year internship, with different levels of experience, and I think, and I kind of try to just stack myself up on where I kind of entered in relative to that, and I was just right at the bottom. I can name 3 different types of grapes, maybe. That's why I'm still so amazed that I fell into the career a little bit. It was, what drew me, I guess, was just that, as I started tasting wine and drinking wine, so much of it was flipping the bottle around and being like, oh, this is a good bottle, I like this, and I would look at the names on the back of Rick Rial, Newburgh, these are all these little podunk towns I grew up near, and I had no idea that wine industry was kind of thing. And so that kind of started me exploring that as a as a thought, like, oh, this could be a job, this could be a career. What is this like? And so, I mean, what kind of drove me to kind of consider it was just that mix of the connection of working with the land, working with the hands, because that was something that I spent so much time doing, kind of with rafting and skiing. You're physically doing things at all times, but I wanted to mix in a little bit more, education and kind of think about things a little bit more heady as well. So, but I really wanted to kind of do something that kind of kept me connected to the place a little bit, and I think being in a spot that I really was excited about was great. I mean, I loved being in Indiana. I love the people, but I think that you can find awesome people no matter where you go, really. I mean, if you're open to meeting great people, you can have those really cool experiences. And but I really wanted to find a spot where I also could be excited every day to just drive around and just kind of ooh and ah a little bit, to be corny, I guess. But so I got that in Colorado, and then I definitely get that in Oregon. So when I left Colorado, I hopped on my bike and then biked out here to get out here, and so which was a great experience too. I mean, spending 3 weeks or whatever that was, kind of heading through Wyoming and through the national parks, and then kind of coming over all the way through the states was. It was such a great way to travel. I mean, it's great pacing to do the trip too. I mean, you spent, you're seeing, you're traveling, whatever it is, 50, 100 miles each day. So you're able to cover a lot of ground, but it's happening pretty slowly. So you really get a lot of time to look around and experience it. And I think that was, for me, that was the best month or so of my life. It was so fun doing that experience. And then by the time I got out here, I was just totally energized and ready to hop into going back to school and kind of just to throw myself into the wine industry at that point. But yeah, I was excited, but I didn't know anything yet. So that was, but I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because it was, each one of those classes, I was asking all the most basic questions that you could possibly ask, when are these grapes grown? And just kind of starting right from square one. And so, but it was a big learning experience for me. And then, as I was going through school, I was working in the tasting room, and mainly the tasting room and somewhat in the cellar too, at Panther Creek. And so that was, that winery has been around, for, was one of, not the first generation, but pretty close to after that. And so that was a great spot to land, just because I was able to hear about how, all these different vineyards that they were working with, especially, a lot of the really OG, really respected stalwarts in the industry. I mean, being able to taste Freedom Hill, being able to taste Shea, and kind of learning these nuances was really exciting and kind of eye-opening for me. It was just being like, okay, so this is what Oregon is. These are what all these different regions are. These are what these AVAs taste like, and kind of how much nuance was there and how much variability. And that was kind of made me pretty excited being there. I was working with Eric Berg there too, he ended up being central to my story later again too. So I was glad to meet him and work with him there. So it was mainly the tasting room, but then also Michael would, at the time, I kind of felt like he was throwing me a bone a little bit, letting me top and clean barrels and stuff. I was like, wow, that's so nice of him to do that. And now I kind of think, I'm like, wait a second, I think he just didn't want to climb barrels that day. I think he was giving me the grunt work, but I was just so excited to be able to do anything. And so just eager to throw myself into that kind of stuff. And so I was working in the tasting room while going to school, and then my first harvest, I wanted to kind of, I feel like I'd seen Panther Creek a little bit, and I just wanted to see what another facility was like. I thought it was kind of important to just kind of experience a bunch of different places, really. So my first harvest was at A to Z, And once again, I mean, that was another totally eye-opening experience. I mean, because you learn about the theoretical side of things, and especially coming, from Panther Creek, where everything's kind of small and hands-on, and one person can kind of do it at that scale, to go into A to Z, where it was just, I mean, it was a real production winery. I mean, it was huge, and so that was a real great experience there too. I mean, just kind of see how much wine that they were making each day, and how they were doing it, and what that looked like, and what was organized. And I mean, it was such a efficient operation there. And I try to, each one of the stops, it's, even if you don't remember it or think about it at the time, I feel like I try to like think back on it afterwards and pick and pull what experience was, I want to kind of keep in my career and kind of be able to give to other people. And that was the one thing that stood out to me was Michael, was just how in control he was, and just how important it was for him, that everybody was having a good experience with their harvest. Because you don't see that everywhere. I think there's a lot of wineries that are just totally, especially first-year interns, which is what I was, or your disposable parts a little bit, it's like, okay, well, you run the lees filter this harvest. Oh, okay, that's what I do. Or you're on the sorting line, I'll harvest, which is, it's a totally normal thing. But I could tell that it really was important to him that everybody took something out of that harvest. And so that's something that I always want to try to do with everybody that comes here. I just remember, kind of being able to sit in on kind of conversations each day as they would go around the tanks, even though I didn't necessarily have anything to contribute, but just being able to listen to those thoughts and why this was happening or what this was going on that was pretty neat. It was not a necessary thing for him, because I knew that him and Meredith were both, they were working 20 more hours than I was, and I was tired. And so that was, I thought that's something that was I really wanted to take away from that experience at the time. So that was, and then after that, harvest ended. I was still going to school, but I was working at Panther Creek there, and they were bought out at that point. So they were owned by the chambers, and they sold to a private equity investments. That was not the best transition for everybody that worked there, which was kind of a bummer. They kind of let everybody go, and there was no communication. So it was a little bit of a sad ending to that period. But it kind of gave me the opportunity to look around for something else as well. And so I just started cold calling, as you do, like other wineries, saying, all right, I have, here I am, like I have a small amount of experience, like does anybody need any help? Like I'm, willing to kind of do anything. And so I found a winery called Cherry Hill, right in the Willamette Hills. And he said, oh, right, actually we need somebody. And so I drove out there, and I got there, a little respectable amount early. You don't want to show up too early, so I got there a couple minutes early. And it's a pretty big property. I think that's about a 200-acre vineyard. And I show up at the gate, and the gate's locked. And I'm like, oh shoot! Like I swear I had this time right. Like, and it was before smartphones at that point. But and I was like, I must have had the time right. And so I call the winery, and nobody answers. And I'm like standing there debating what to do. It was like, do I go home? Like I kind of really need this job. Like, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna climb the fence. So I climbed the fence and then walk up the, like, whatever it is, half mile or so to the winery. And I'm thinking like, all right, either I'm gonna get like, just like, no cert on the spot, or maybe I got the wrong, whatever it is. And so I showed up, and the owner, Mike Sweeney, was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, and he was like, oh, I was just thinking you stiffed me. I didn't show up. Like, he's like, I forgot to open the gate. Like, sorry about that. So, but the good news is, I guess that endeared me to him, and so I was able to get a job at that point, which was great. And so, but yeah, that was I was working with Ken Cook, who was the winemaker and vineyard manager there, and I think there's a lot of candidates, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes as far as whoever gets the award of nicest person in the wine industry, but I think Ken Cook is perhaps is definitely in the running if he's not number one. He was just so open. He was such an open book to me, and which I really appreciated. Especially because he was wearing two hats as a vineyard manager, winemaker, and so was there and was working tasting room part-time and then in the cellar with him as well. And so like I said, he was just really generous with all of his information and everything he had to share. And so, walking the vineyard with him every couple of days, just kind of listening and kind of picking his brain, and then, and just kind of being at a smaller operation at that point. They had a boost in production, kind of right during the recession, like a lot of other wineries, and they were kind of in a little bit of a contraction at that point. So it was a smaller operation, so you're kind of able to do a little bit of everything, which was great for me to kind of be able to make mistakes and try things at a, kind of at a lower, impact level or lower consequences at least. And so kind of learning about how to manage a wine club, how to do events, what goes into all those things, what does it take for, cleaning and preparing a cellar, just kind of being able to actually do all those things firsthand, which is kind of, for me, is kind of the best way that I learn, is kind of doing things and then screwing up and then being like, all right, well, I'm gonna do something different the next time. But yeah, that was a really positive time there. And then during harvest, so that was the 2013 harvest. So it was, I don't know if today's wetter than today. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about how the weather is today, but that was obviously the wet harvest, and so which was another level of challenge to it. And but yeah, it was great. At that size, you're just so eager to have an influence on everything, and I just remember being over there, with a shop vac, being like, I'm going to shop off any bugs that are on the grapes, just trying to do every little 1% detail that you could get away with. And now some of it you're like, all right, well, that was a little extra that didn't need to happen. But Ken was really, I really am appreciative of him for just kind of letting me do all the aspects of that harvest. Especially coming from A to Z, which was a really big operation, which takes so many different people doing so many different tasks, and everybody kind of needs to have a specialty a little bit to kind of to pull off that operation, to then see the extreme side of it, to really a quite a bit smaller side where you're doing it all. There's no other person to kind of lean in on. Was really great. And during that harvest too, I worked. The other intern there was Ryan Kelly, who once again he kind of comes up again and later in my story at least. But that was, so I started there in the winter of 13, and then worked through harvest. So then after harvest, there was kind of there was no more work at that point at a small place, which was a bit of a disappointment for me, just because at that point I had just finished school. I had all this kind of energy and was totally ready to throw myself into working and kind of being in a spot, and that was kind of right at the end of the recession a little bit, and so finding work was slower than I thought, and so that kind of it made me kind of aware of how much luck and timing has to do on I'm sure it's like that in every career, but it really feels like in the wine industry too. Because we have so many, you meet so many great interns that come through, the wine industry swells to this giant number, and then after harvest, not everybody wants a job, but a large chunk of them do, and there's not enough work for everybody. And so I kind of think about that quite a bit, how much of it is just being, not only being the right person for the right place, but then also just being in the right spot at the right time when somebody needs work is such a big component of it. I mean, and I think about that with friends of mine that, some people got great jobs right away. They had awesome opportunities, year one, year two, and other people, it's taken them longer. And some people still, friends of mine that I'm like, you are a really awesome like winemaker, and like just haven't quite found the right home for it. So I think being really like thankful and appreciative of like, being in a nice spot and being in, being in a kind of a, just being happy to be, in a spot where you're able to thrive a little bit is really a lucky thing and a really great thing too. But so that after that harvest, I started looking, I was looking around for more work, and my wife and I lived in Salem at the time, and and she had a good job, and so we were just kind of slowly started expanding my search a little bit, and we weren't really ready to like upend where we lived, and so it just would slowly be, all right, let's look 10 miles, all right, 20 miles, and kind of going around and around, and eventually, we kind of talked about, all right, like I think maybe. Would you be open if we had to move outside of the area to kind of for work? And she was, which was great, and I'm thankful for that. And so started looking around more and more, and then eventually found a job in Washington, working for Maryhill Winery, just outside of the gorge there. And so started there in it must have been maybe January of 14. And so we moved out to the Dalles, which was great. I love the Dalles. I love that area too. I mean, you talk about like, access for doing things outside. I mean, especially coming from Colorado and from Utah, I mean, it was just like, you're just in a playground a little bit. So I was really excited. I mean, it was just like, you had all these hiking trails, we'd drive around, and if there was one other car at the parking lot, it'd be like, let's go to the next trailhead. Like, there's no point in like even, we don't want to see the crowds. And so that was pretty neat. And just that drive to work through the gorge every day, it was just something that you never really got old of. And so, I mean, that just having that kind of view and being around that was like just really recharging. And being at Maryhill was such a formative thing for me too. I mean, that winery, we worked with 28 different grape varietals and made 50 different SKUs. And so it was, it wasn't, you didn't necessarily become an expert in all these different grapes, but you had the ability to at least have some exposure to so many different grapes and from so many regions too. I mean, because they were, fruit was being drawn from the Columbia Gorge all the way to Walla Walla, all the way up north, so you had this giant area all across the state where they were pulling fruit. And so not only was the harvest, really long and diverse, but you just were able to kind of have some exposure to so many different AVAs and so many different grapes that it was really, that was really cool. I mean, just to have some amount of like reference points to be like, okay, this is what Red Mountain's like. Okay, this is what the Rattlesnake Hills are, and kind of how are these all different, and how do we treat all of these different wines? It kind of got you kind of activating a lot of different parts of your brain. And so when I was there, that was I got hired as a lab tech, and so it was kind of a hybrid job where it was half lab, half cellar, and so which was great. And it really is kind of my favorite thing when I ask other people, other friends of mine and other winemakers, like, is like, how do you see the cellar a little bit? Like, I love asking people that question because I'm curious, like, because there's so many great winemakers out there. You can think of that. Some people see their cellar through tasting. They're tasting every day, and there's other people that see it through, just physically moving things, or a spreadsheet, or there's so many different ways to view it, and not one of them is right or wrong. It's just, but for me, I kind of view it through the lab data a little bit, because you have these hard analytical kind of reference points. And so those are, you can use those for jumping off, and it helps me just kind of, however my brain is wired, to kind of, see, kind of map the cellar in my head a little bit. And so being in Mariel and seeing that side of it was kind of, I think, set that in motion a little bit. And and then just being at a place, year round, that was a big production facility too. I mean, they were making, they were and are making a lot of wine, and so you're kind of, you're really, every day is kind of important, in a way. You have to be doing things and pushing things forward, and that was, that was a really key thing for me. I mean, and that was, so my first harvest there was able to by my first harvest, I was able to move up to do night crew supervisor. So kind of was able to have a little bit more control on things, and kind of have a hand in everything. And so I was appreciative of that level of responsibility that they kind of were given to me. But yeah, I mean, then also, I mean, at that size too, there was a little bit of a Barney Watson strategy in there. I don't think any of them knew Barney Watson, but maybe they did. They should have. But it's just, so much of it is just, let's test everything. Let's just cross all the or dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And so there was, every single wine. I mean, there's 52 different wines, but there was, so many different lots, and every single one of them, where you would do trial, you'd run the data on, and then you would do acid trials on, you'd do sugar trials on, you would do, whether or not, you taste it and you're like, oh, this tastes good. Well, do the trial on it anyway. And so I think that has kind of stuck with me a little bit, and I think that's been, I think it's not a small thing to just be, just put the work in every single day, whether you think it needs it or not. Just kind of just check, because I feel like, because we see that a lot here, where it's we'll run a lot of stuff and be like, yeah, this one's good, and then you run everything and you're like, yeah, it didn't need anything. Or maybe you do it and you're like, you know what, it does need a little help, and like, I'm kind of glad we did that. And so having that, kind of just seeing that be, that level of like lack of complacency, I thought was, that was like, okay, so this is professional winemaking. This is what you need to do. And so, yeah, I was there for 2 years, and around that time, I wanted to kind of keep being aggressive with my goals a little bit, and so, I didn't tell anybody, but I had kind of aggressive goals that I wanted to reach, as far as being assistant winemaker at a certain age, and then working my way up to winemaker at a certain point. And I guess it was easier if you don't tell anybody those goals. You don't have to not meet them. But and so after 2 years, I kind of was thinking like, okay, I feel like this has been a great experience. I've learned a lot, but I'm kind of ready to see something different, to learn from new people, to kind of for the next challenge a little bit. And then just by chance, I got a call from Ryan Kelly, who I did harvest with at Cherry Hill, and Eric Berg, who were both working at Illahe. And Eric was leaving. He was the associate winemaker at the time, and he was leaving to go back to teaching. And then he went back to winemaking again. I think he did that a couple times, but they called, and I was very aware of Illahe at that time, because I had one of the guys I went to school with, Gabe Jagle, was the assistant winemaker here, probably back in 2010, or maybe 2012, and so I had tasted wines with him, and I remember him just raving about this place and about working with Brad Ford. And so I, kind of had in my head, okay, that's a good spot. And then I was tracking what Ryan and Eric were doing, and I was like, man, those guys are they're having more fun than everybody else. Like, it doesn't look like work, you know, like they're just goofing off. And, you know, and then, you know, just with everything like the 1899, so I'm like, these guys are canoeing down the river, like for work. Like, meanwhile, like I'm on a bottling line, like all right, there's something cool happening there. And so I'd come out and tasted here before too. And it was one of those rare experiences just in the tasting room where I was just like, I love all these wines. And I remember buying all of them when we came out, and which, you know, you don't always see. You know, a lot of times you have your favorites and whatever. But I remember thinking, oh, the wines are really interesting here. They kind of all have a point of view a little bit, and they're, you know, and you can make good wines and have a lot of fun. Like that seems like something worth investigating. So they gave me a call and they're like, hey, they're looking for an assistant winemaker, and so. So I applied, or I kind of sent a resume out here, and then got an interview, and it was kind of funny because they still talk about this a little bit in the interview, like because you know, we're sitting down, and you know, it's the traditional, you know, whatever hour-long normal formats for an interview, and at the end. And I was thinking, all right, this is going pretty well. Like I think I got a shot at this, and then at the end, you know, they throw a couple softballs at you just to kind of get to know you. And somebody asked, oh, what's your favorite, you know, beer? You know, and I was like, oh, geez, like these guys are pretty cool. Like I should say something like hipstery, like some like cream saison or even PB, you know, like. But I was like, I don't know if I can't really lie. Like I'm not a good liar. Like, and I was like, Keystone Light. Keystone Light is my favorite beer. And I just saw like like their faces just turned to just like complete, it was like shock and then just disappointment. Like was what it was. They were just like, oh my gosh. Like, so I got back in my car and I called my wife and I was like, I screwed it. I screwed it up. Like I had the job and I totally lost it. I saw the moment that it happened, and but then then I ended up, you know, getting the job, which was great despite that. And but now every time we have like a distributor come, they always bring like a 12-pack of Keystone Lights for me. You know, I'm like, oh, okay, which is a decent outcome, like, but. So came aboard here as assistant winemaker, and that has been such a great fit for me. So that was in the winter of 2016, and so it's been almost 10 years now at this point, and yeah, I mean, I absolutely love it here. I mean, I was able to learn so much from Brad. I mean, kind of his. You know, I often say he's the smartest person that I've ever met, and you know, and I think he could be governor one day if he wanted to. But you know, and I think the biggest thing was kind of making, because there's so much great wine out there. You know, I mean, I think about the wines we made at Cherry Hill, which I was really proud about. You know, and they got good scores. You know, for whatever that matters, like from publications. You know, and the sales kind of weren't there a little bit, and I kind of just filed that away a little bit. I didn't really know exactly. I knew there was more to that component. So then it was like, okay, so there's more to the place in making good wine. There's something else in there. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I knew there was something to do with sales, but you know, my business sense is. I guess probably buying Powerball tickets when the jackpot's high and not buying them when they're low. So I don't necessarily, not the expert in that, but you know, but I knew there was some mystery in that. And I mean, the thing that I think Brad has kind of figured out, and then we think about and we talk about all the time is, you know, why are we making this wine? What are we telling people about this wine? You know, and I think that was really eye-opening to kind of be like, okay, like it's not enough to just to pick the right barrels and to, you know, spend the right amount of time on skins or, you know, picking out the right bricks. It's a little bit of conveying a story to it, and I think a lot of that is kind of just the creativity that kind of goes into that. And so, and turns out that stuff is fun too. And so that's something we, that I learned from him, and then kind of we keep always thinking about it, and kind of how can we make this wine better, and how can we make this wine more interesting, or what can we do that's just a little bit different that we can kind of communicate. So I started as assistant winemaker in 2016, and then eventually moved up to associate winemaker, and then starting in 2020, which was a nice easy harvest, became head winemaker at that point, and which was a nice softball for that one. But yeah, it's been such a great fit here, and I am really thankful that we have such a cohesive team, and I really like being at a small place where you're kind of able to get your hands into everything. We have Bethany, who's an amazing national sales manager, who also just gets grimy and does harvests every single day, and then meanwhile everybody in the cellar goes out and does sales, which isn't the most unique thing in the world, but you kind of see all the aspects of the facility, and kind of it's really just holistic in that sense. And so that's been great, and I'm just really continue to be excited about making wines about here, and and then it's been fun being here too, because we've had such kind of neat growth since the entire time, and so there's been just fun challenges in that. I mean, when I started, we were making 6,000 cases, and we've gone up to doing 25,000 cases. We're back a little bit down from that, but the that is just like a fun challenge to be like, okay, like we made this wine, can we make it the same way by increasing the volume? What do we need to do? How do we do it? Like, where's the ceiling on this? And that's kind of the, I love all those challenges a little bit. I kind of just I just want to see where the end point is on everything there, and so that's we've just been kind of keep progressing, and you kind of trying to be as consistent as possible in that regard.
It's a good story. Let's back up for a second. I'm curious about when you were in Colorado and looking for the next thing. How were you aware of Chemeketa's wine program? How were you aware of wine as a potential career at that point?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one I'm not entirely sure about a little bit. It was some of it was just some exposure to drinking wines a little bit. Going out to wine bars and hearing about the stories of things, and kind of that resonating with me a little bit. I think that was the artisan part of it. Knowing that there was real people making these things, and knowing that seeing really awesome wines coming out of Oregon at these kind of smaller places in rural towns made it feel like something that was attainable. And so I started looking at different programs, and almost went to the Walla Walla one, which would have been a great fit too. And I know people love that. There's only so many different programs, but having a connection to Oregon, growing up here, made that a little bit easier, because I was like, okay, I already know people here, and so that was kind of the reason I chose coming out to Oregon at that point. And but a lot of it was just a total leap, being like, well, okay, if this this doesn't work, I'll try something else. But it just by it's one of those things just by chance. I always think I'm like, despite not knowing anything about that decision, it just randomly ended up being a really good fit, and I'm lucky for that.
So you mentioned being at Chemeketa, kind of the end of Al and Barney's time there. Yeah. Tell me about, you mentioned obviously having Barney's voice in your head sometimes when you're in there, in the winery. Tell me about some of the courses, the lessons, the sort of the takeaways from the educational part at Chemeketa. And as you were kind of working at the same time, how was it reflected? How were the real and theoretical married at that time?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of other people, where you read about the theory of things, and then And then when you actually do it, you're like, oh, that's what that looks like. I had a lot of those moments where you're like, oh, I've read chapters on this, and you're like, okay, but this is how you dig out a tank. And so there was a lot of the rubber meets the road a little bit. I mean, I think for my takeaway on what Barney's message was just that grinding a little bit, was just that test everything all the time and kind of gather there's no bits of that bad information or bad data points. And so, but at the end of the day, the goal is to do nothing. I think I have like a self-consciousness of being lazy a little bit, and I think that's one of those things where you're like, I try to work extra hard to not be lazy a little bit. And I think that was a little bit what I think of with the Barney method too, where it's like, the goal is to just bring in the grapes and not do anything, but let's run every single one of these samples and then hopefully not do anything. And that's what we really tried to do here. I mean, especially because my favorite wines, I think it was cool to be able to see, the wines of Maryhill, which were, a little bit, the goal was a more consistent stylistically from year to year, kind of making a wine that was, it was consistent in that regard, and then most Oregon wines are the opposite of that, where it's just, vintage dependent, and you're kind of showing that off a little bit. And so seeing those two sides of things, and, having done that, I really fall more into the, do nothing category if you can get away with it. And so, and the wines we make here at Illahe too, I like the natural style of wines a little bit. I kind of always think of them as being like pragmatically natural. And so we end up being in a lot of like natural, like kind of natty wine shops a little bit. And because we follow a lot of those tenets a little bit, but at the same time, we're making these quote unquote natty wines, but then also at the same time, we're running PCR on everything. We're doing, we're just doing trials on every single wine and getting cell counts. We're getting potassium, just getting all of this data to, at the end of the day, throw it into a file and do nothing with it and not try to touch the wine. And I think that was what, I think that's something that I really learned from Barney in that regard. It was just kind of, you don't want to do anything. But at the end of the day, you're selling a product, and people want to drink good wine more than they want to have a really cool story. Mm-hmm. Even though you kind of need both a little bit, but no.
So you talked about your first harvest at A to Z, obviously a large place, and tell me about memories of the first harvest for you, and what, as you're getting towards the end of it and you're thinking about what to do next. What makes you want to keep doing wine at that point? What is it about working in wine so far that has kind of captured you at that point?
Yeah, it was. Like I mentioned, it was really eye-opening too. And I think, especially your first harvest, on everybody's resume that's ever been put out there, you put hardworking, or you say that in an interview. And I certainly had that idea, in my head. I was like, oh yeah, I'm a really hardworking guy. I would do all these long days on the river all the time. And then you do your first harvest and you're like, oh, this is hard work. I get it now. I thought I was working hard, but now I really see that. And I think what wanted me to keep going was that I had fun doing that. I think that was like one of those things where it was like, yeah, how many tons today? Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for this. And I kind of found that was one of those things that, and I don't think you really know until you do it the first time. We see that so often. When people come in for the first harvest, you have an idea in your head of what wine's going to be. I think the most famous quote around here is we had somebody come in the lab and just kind of give a big sigh and go, I just thought it'd be more bucolic. We're just like, this is the most bucolic as it could be here. And so I think, but doing that harvest was just kind of, I just realized how much I was scratching the surface. It was just, especially, because you're just figuring out, okay, how do I take apart the destemmer? How does this pump work? You're right there, learning the basic things, and it kind of just opened up a lot of questions for me. It was like, okay, where's this fruit from? Like, why are we picking this today? Kind of all of these. Why is this being pressed? I see people are tasting it. Like, what goes into all of these things? And I just was left with so many questions. I felt like at the end of my first harvest, I knew quite a bit less than I had entered with in a lot of ways. And so I was just really encouraged to kind of be like, okay, I got a lot to figure out, but I want to know all these things. And so that's what I left from there. And you get to meet so many different people at that point. Your first introduction to the wine industry, people coming from different backgrounds, from different countries. You kind of get your eyes opened a little bit to the whole wine industries and what kind of options are out there a little bit.
So from there, you talked about going to Cherry Hill and a whole different kind of experience. So tell me about second harvest and about working at a smaller place on the heels of A to Z.
Yeah, it was. I'm really thankful to kind of have both of those experiences, and I always tell people, and it's weird because occasionally we'll get sometimes you'll get people that will do harvest and then asked about doing a repeat harvest, which I always say. We would, well, not to everybody, but to a lot of them, be like, we would happily have you back. You're great at harvest, and we would happily have you back. You will learn something doing another harvest here. But I might recommend you go someplace else, and it's not because I don't like you or I don't think you're going to be a really awesome fit here with us, but that was such a cool. That was so beneficial for me, seeing just two different schools of thoughts and two different ways to do things, and just kind of just really, okay, there's two ways. There must be more than two ways now, and so I was really glad to kind of have that second data points. And then being at a smaller place, it was, they were focused. Most of the fruit was being sold to different wineries, but then making wines in different sizes, and what are they looking for? And and there was three of us there, and just like I mentioned, being able to kind of to do every single thing, and then also you learn by doing that, and then also at a small place, kind of feeling like you have some input on certain actions. Like, okay, I just read about this. We were talking about this in class. What do you guys think about this? Or what's, this is some new new research that's coming out, and just being in a place where Ken's like, I don't know, let's try it. And where, rightfully, if you go to AZ and you go, hey, what about, this 20,000 gallon tank of Chardonnay? What if we did this? And they go, no, we already got this giant account that's going to, purchase this. But so being able to kind of have those little impacts, and then just be like, all right, can we try this, and then see what what the results is outside of that. Because we had those, you had those experiences a little bit in school, in the small, they have the production facility there, and so you're making some wine, you're learning a little bit, and Barney would always ask the class, what do you guys want to do with this? But it's a collaborative effort there, so you have the whole class kind of votes on doing this or that or the other thing, but being at a small place, I felt like was kind of my first real ability to be like, can we do three different things in these three different tanks, and kind of learn those kind of impacts, especially working with Pinot, where it's so little inputs kind of change it so much. That was a really cool takeaway on that, and that was I found, especially after working there and then a bigger place too, I was like, I like smaller places a little bit. I kind of like being able to kind of have a little bit more, I don't know if it's control, but just having a little bit more impact and kind of and just a view of everything.
So you talked about the next step for you, going to the dials and seeing a whole different side of things. You said 28 varietals, 50 plus SKUs. That's a lot. I'm curious about getting a handle on that. How do you approach a problem like that where you're seeing AVAs, you're seeing varietals for the first time, and you're experiencing them? And how did you approach that, and what was the kind of the progression for you, the evolution for you while you're at Maryhill?
Yeah, I mean, it was once again, it was kind of, I think, in the same way that everybody might say they're a hard worker. I think everybody thinks you have a little bit more experience than you really have when you go into a spot. And so that was something for me where I was like, yeah, I've done all these things. And it's like, yeah, well, I've done them once or twice. And so kind of being in a spot and then doing things 1,000 times or 10,000 times, you kind of really commit those to memory a little bit. And so, and I think especially being in a spot for multiple years too, you kind of, that first year is a little bit of like, just inputs, you're kind of taking in all these things, the processes, and then the second year things slow down a little bit and you're kind of thinking a little bit more about, okay, why is this fruit different? What are we doing on these with this fruit that's different than that fruit? And then just having an opportunity to taste a lot. I think that was almost more than anything. I mean, you had so many different wines, the barrel room was, 6 high, the size of a football field. And it's, kind of going in there and just seeing how all the different wines are managed, and I think, and what it takes to manage that amount, was pretty neat because it's more than one person can do, really. I mean, to kind of, to do all of those different things. And so that was pretty neat, and then also to learn a little bit like, all right, we have all these different varietals. Which ones do I really like? Which ones are, a little bit more challenging? And I think that ended up being really helpful for us here. I mean, so in 2022, the frost year, we were hit pretty hard at our sites. We were down to a little under a ton an acre is what we got off the vineyard that year. And so going into that harvest, it hit in the springtime, and so we kind of had enough time to think about, well, we're probably not going to find any Pinot. Well, it turns out we probably could have, but at the time we were like, we're definitely not going to find any Pinot, because if everybody's hit even half as hard as we are, there's probably a handful of grapes out there. And so we made the decision to, well, let's buy fruit from Washington. Like we kind of need to keep making wine. That's what we do. It's kind of, I'm not really good at sitting idly, but so we decided to buy wine from Washington. And so working at Maryhill and then having some of that experience to be like, okay, these are some vineyards I remember really liking, or these AVAs were really nice, and this is what we did with them. And I like that. This is what we did with it. And I think we could do something, I'd be curious on what if we did it this way, and I think that takeaway was really helpful in this experience. I mean, because that year we bought Syrah from Red Mountain and the Horsehaven Hills, as well as from the Rocks. We got Grenache. We just got all these different varietals from all across the state. And so having some sort of reference points from that time at Maryhill was really helpful. I mean, I talked with Scott Bjornson, who was the cellar master at Maryhill at the time, and now he's the winemaker at Bjornson, and they did the same thing where he went out and got fruit from those regions as well. So talking with him afterwards, it was like, we were both really glad that we had some experience, because there's so much, otherwise, I mean, it's like Washington's a foreign land to us, like, and there's, so knowing like where to hunt, who to call, kind of having some of those points was really, I was really glad to have that.
So you talked about having an awareness of Illahe, having some friends working here, having been here. Tell me about learning about an assistant winemaker job here, having it as a goal. What was your, I guess, confidence level? Did you feel like you were ready to be an assistant winemaker? Did you feel like this was a challenge you were ready to take on? And when you did take it on, was it what you expected? Yeah, it was definitely one of those things where I knew there was elements that I felt really confident in being able to do. Having the lab background,
I felt really good about bringing that side of things. I felt really, really comfortable with the harvest side of everything. Some of the decision makings within the year, I kind of thought, all right, well, I'll have to learn that on the job a little bit, and that was something I did. And so, but I was lucky to have Brad to kind of lean on in that regard, because that was, I was confident that I could do it, and there was some growing into the job for sure. I think a lot of it was, once again, it was kind of doing things twice, but then there was a lot of things not having done for the first time, which, just as far as ordering glass or running a bottling, all these things you kind of have to figure out a little bit on the job, and there's kind of no other way to do it really. And so I was thankful to kind of have a long leash, I guess, when I showed up, because there's definitely some things that I wouldn't do now if I would go back in time, kind of have a little bit more experience of those things. But in general, I guess what I like about Illahe and about this place is that there's a do-it-yourself sense here, where that's a really valued component. And I think, and talking to friends that work at other regions or other places, that isn't necessarily, for right or for wrong, isn't always a thing. A lot of times you call in an expert to do your HVAC, or you call in an expert to do this or that. You kind of have on your speed dial experts in those realms, and you don't need to be an expert at everything, because what your expertise in is making the wines. And so, but when I got here, it was like, no, I was kind of like, oh, who do I ask to do this? And like, no, just figure it out, and that stuff's fun, I think a lot of it is like, we're like, oh, let's build it ourselves, and there's a lot of that stuff where it's like, how do we do this? Well, let's weld it, or like, let's, you just kind of make every single one of those elements. You don't call in a repairman to do something. You just try to order the parts from some specialist that fabbed it, and because you can do it for cheaper. And so I think there was a sense of that culture here, where that was, and once again, that was a lucky break for me, kind of came in, and then it was like that sort of like figure it out mentality was valued here. And so I think, even though I had some learning to do on the job, that was kind of expected, or kind of not viewed as a negative, kind of bringing in a fresh perspective to that side of things. And then there's also just kind of that mentorship element of everything. And so Brad, once again, is just an open book on everything that he knows, just in the same way that I've kind of have picked up from everybody else. And I try to do that with anybody that comes in here. I think just the same way that Michael, that I took away that from Michael Davies, that that everybody should at least not hate their job. I'm not. So I always tell people when they come to do harvest, they come to work here, I'm like, not everything's going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of cleaning, but like I really want you to come away from this experience, it be positive for you. And so just kind of making that a focal point is really important to me. I want everybody to be much in the same way that I kind of had that opportunity to do a little bit of everything. I want everybody else to, as you come in, be like, you're not going to get to do everything all the time, but you will do everything. And so that's, that is, I think, a valued thing here, and something that I kind of always want to continue to foster for as long as I'm in the wine industry.
So tell me about, obviously, Illahe, Brad's second generation owner here. So there's a lot of history here for him, a lot of history here on the space. Tell me about working with him, getting to understand sort of his way of doing things, and the kind of the Illahe method, and getting to know the space, getting to know the vines here, getting to know the work. How long does it take, and what was sort of your process for getting to know those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the longer you're in a space, the more you learn it. And, I think it's, Illahe had been, its first vintage was '07, and I came aboard on '16. So there was a bit of a history in there, and so I was able to taste some of those things and learn, and kind of, pick brains a little bit on what made spots different. I think the main thing, Brad is always thinking about like, why are we doing things? What can we be doing a little bit out of the box? Sometimes very out of the box. Sometimes there isn't even a box, but and some of those ideas are wild and wonky. But they're kind of how creativity, I think, works a little bit. And so, so learning those different spots, it's evolved over time a little bit. And I think some of it is coming in and having a certain expectation about wines, about blocks, and then that's kind of has been changing. And I think a lot of it too is, the space has really been evolving as well. We've had more acreage coming online, and there's more plantings, that are happening with each given year. And so there's, that hasn't got stagnant, I guess, as far as like, we're kind of constantly learning new things. And a lot of the vineyard is relative, some of the vineyard is new, and so that's changing as well. But yeah, it was, initially, I'll admit, was like a bit of a big change of speed coming from area where it was incredibly analytical driven. You're testing everything all the time. And then, at least, especially when I came in here, we were really trying to make natural wine, and it was really low intervention. And so I think that's been one evolution, kind of something that I feel like has, I've kind of bringing to the table a little bit, and then, but still being like respectful of the wines as they're being made, was kind of like, where's this balance point? I've, we're just so used to running all this, getting all this information out of all the fruits, knowing all these data points, and then having, a little bit more of a low intervention side, and being like, where's the right in this a little bit, and kind of playing around with that, and seeing like, what can we get away with? What do we not want to get away with? Where is kind of that balance point in there a little bit? And I think especially as some of the wines have the volume has changed. Sometimes it's like, I remember Dirk, who's now the winemaker at Copa di Vino. I worked with him at Maryhill. Him always saying like, small lot, small screw up, a big lot, big screw up, like when he would say that when he'd hand people work orders, which I don't know if was the most motivating thing in the world, but and I think about that here a little bit too, because we have some small lots, and you can play around, you can experiment a lot with. Then you have other bigger lots where it's like, you kind of really need this tank of Viognier to finish, because we have one shot at it, and it's kind of our year a little bit. And so knowing, all right, what dials you can turn as far as like intervention, and which ones you're just kind of totally okay experimenting with a little bit, and then knowing that it's okay to not always intervene as well. I think that was the takeaway. The 1899 project, which was the wine that we make, without electricity, so it's horse powered, and then and everything's done without electricity, the whole 9 yards. And so that's been a really fun project, because that's, in some ways that's our calling card, as far as what people know us for. Even though it's our smallest production wine, it's kind of the one that kind of people represent the brand as. And so what's been fun is, we have these artificial confines of like, we want to make this wine using only technologies available prior to the year 1899. How do we make this wine better each year? While not, while knowing that we can't do certain things. And so that's been something I feel like I've been able to really help kind of push a little bit, in that, all right, well, what if we upgrade our bike pump? Let's upgrade this element, and kind of just try to find ways to drive that style. And then you have that as a data point. So, you have this wine, which is really low intervention, and then you have our other wines that are more modern, and then seeing what differences are in there, and then which one of these elements are making your life easier. There's some things that you're just like, all right, this is just what makes life better, and then there's other ones that are okay, this one's just easier, or this one, kind of you have those two different things, and knowing where to apply those in all the different wines that's been a really fun learning experience. I mean, I think that just energizes us every year.
Tell me a story of the 1899 wine from you, either making it, transporting it. What's the memory for you regarding that wine?
Yeah, it's the funnest wine to make. I mean, just with when the horses come out, we had one vintage where one of the horses, he hurt his leg, so we had to carry up all the buckets from down to the vineyard. And we had all these interns, everybody comes to work here because they hear about the 1899 story, but then by the end of the day, hauling buckets up, and then realizing that you then had to pedal them all was, they were like, oh, what are we doing here? And then, so like, just, you realize how much work goes into those things, but just that it just slows down. I mean, it's a different time, especially because harvest is so chaotic. I mean, you're running around and, everything's, compressed to then have to be like, all right, today we're making 3 tons and it's going to be the most work that you're going to do all harvest. So doing that, and then just, and you're thinking about everything. And so, so then, obviously it finishes, we'll load the wine onto stagecoaches and take it down to the river or bike it to the river. And for me, and then it's a 3 or 4 days, we used to do 4 days to Portland, canoeing it on the river. But I always think about like, how lucky is it? I mean, like you think about like the Venn diagram of me personally, of like my overlapping skill sets of like, all right, I know how to I'm really good at paddling and I make wine. It's like one job. Maybe there's probably a job in Portugal or something that like would match these 2 skills. And then, you kind of add in the biking, which is, always a passion of mine. Like, it's like, all right, there's this one wine, one job. It's right there. It's such a cool confluence of experiences. I mean, I will talk to friends about like the same thing. I'm like, all right, so you're a teacher and you like skiing, and you're trying to add up all these different things, and you're like, oh, there's not really much of a job. I mean, a teacher would be, but like, it's rare to have overlapping skill sets of like your passions and your work and your hobbies and everything. And so that's such a fun experience. And then now, as year after year, we started inviting distributors to go along with us down the river. And so you have friends that come out, and just sharing that story is really fun. Because I think that's that's really the fun of wine. I mean, that's really the reason we do it, right? It's like you have a tangible product to share with people. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that screams sharing more than 1899. I mean, I always say it's, I'm not a law expert, but I think it's got to be at least, probably not a felony, but it's at least a misdemeanor to open a bottle of that by yourself. Like, you have to be sharing it, and so, which is, I think is just kind of, it just is to the nth degree of wine a little bit.
So you mentioned earlier that you became the head winemaker in 2020, which was excellent timing, as you mentioned. Tell me about that year and about facing all the different challenges in a new role. What were the most immediate challenges? What were the solutions, and what were the takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it was just the unknown. At the time, it was like that. There was no information out there, and that was the scariest part about it. So, I think with any other problem that we ever had, I think you can get on the horn and you can call somebody and be like, how do you do this? Or, there's an expert to talk to. And this was a point where there really wasn't too many, even the experts out there kind of were like holding their hands up a little bit. But it was, I think the neatest part about it was that just seeing how collaborative the entire industry was. I mean, it was amazing how many you would just call people and they would just pick up the phone and share, all right, I don't know anything, but I know these 2 things. You go, okay, that's great. And then you call the next person and they go, all right, I only know this or that. And slowly you kind of start building up that web of a little bit of information. And so, at our point, we were low on inventory entering that harvest, so we knew we couldn't skip it. And so we made at the time, we're like, either this is the dumbest decision we're gonna make, or this is, we're gonna be really glad to, but we just started, when other people were rejecting contracts, we were buying them. And so we made more wine that year than we ever had prior to that. And so, but a lot of it was just like, let's go for it. Let's see what happens, and let's change the way we're doing things. Let's be really open to how we're making wine. And it was hard because you're making a lot of these. You're taking guesses a little bit, and so it was like, well, let's do this. Let's rinse off the grapes. Let's see if that does anything. Let's leave it on. You're doing all these things for the first time, and that you're only going to get feedback on it for the next time a little bit, and so you just hope that you're doing it right. I think we were lucky in that our location was this vineyard here. We were getting from surrounding areas. We were a little bit lighter impacted as far as what we were seeing on it. So I was glad that we made all of our wines that year. We still made all the reserve wines. I think there was some great technology that kind of came out right around there. Kate Payne turned us on to the SRX machine, which was really helpful for pulling out all those smoke compounds, or at least, kind of reducing them quite a bit. And so, it was certainly more work than we've ever done in a year. And, but I'm so proud of those wines that we made. And, and it was, the fact that we still did the 1899, we still did the Percheron, all of our kind of higher end wines, they're different than they had been in other years, but I think of any vintage is the wine that I'm the most proud of having made. And it's funny too, because you think 2020 and you talk to everybody else and they go, oh yeah, pandemic, and you go, I'm like, oh right, there was a pandemic, right, that's right. I think about smoke, it's like all I think about, and it's like, oh yeah, right. But yeah, just finding folks that wanted to do harvest too was a big challenge. We had so many people. We constantly had people that were coming and then changed their mind because of that, or we lost a handful of people that were committed, and they said, I'm just watching on the news, it looks like you guys are on fire. Should we? I'm not gonna fly into Oregon. That seems a little risky, and so we lost a lot of interns there. But then we ended up finding. I think we had our best crew ever that year. We found Jordan, our assistant winemaker, did harvest with us that year, and and that has been such a big boom for us having him. And so it was. I think it just kind of gives you some confidence in knowing that this is a really challenging year, and we can do it. And we've had obviously the industry's had a handful of such a variety of those challenging years, kind of in series. Between heat dome and then frost, and then you kind of start stacking up all these different challenges a little bit. And but I think it's at the end, it's like, as long as you're willing to be open and ask people for help and advice, which I think you can make really cool wines. Really neat things if you're just willing to put in the work for it. And so that's been, So this stretch now of 5 years have been, they're all very different wines, and so, but I'm thankful for easy years like this year. But yeah, so that was, and then plus there was some of it of like, if you can do that year, then you can do any year a little bit.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your personal growth in the position now, the six harvests in, I guess, as the head winemaker. How do you feel now versus then, and what is to come? What are you looking forward to next?
I think it's one of those things. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and I think that's totally true here. Where it's like there's some things you feel really confident you have, you're not thinking about. It's like. if you play a lot of basketball, you no longer need to think about dribbling the ball. You're thinking about looking around the court. And so I think I'm kind of at least at that level where there's the day-to-day operations are fine, and so it's fun to think about, like, okay, how do we improve these things? How do we take the next steps a little bit? And just being better at all those things. I think a lot of it is, especially as we grow, you're more team oriented. How do you get better at, kind of communicating what needs to be done? How do you be better at leading? And I think that's kind of is always the industry. Winemaking is kind of a weird thing because it's such a solitary pursuit, except for some of the years, or some of the times a year where it's an incredibly collaborative thing, and you're just around. It takes so many cogs, and then you go back to kind of quietly putting in your headphones and listening to a great podcast like your guys's, and without anybody bothering you. But kind of getting better at those things is just kind of because it takes a team. How do I get better at, communicating and motivating for that, and then also learning more about the vineyard and learning more about the sites and what each year's kind of give us. I think we're in a cool time where there's been kind of a democracy of data out there a little bit. Especially as far as the lab side of things goes. Because when I started, we were just doing, kind of the things you had to do in a lab. You're running pHs and sulfurs, and then now kind of elevating and being like, okay, now part of the things that we have to do are doing cell counts and doing potassium levels and doing kind of getting all this different data, and then kind of figuring out, okay, well, we knew when we had 3 data points, what that meant. Mm-hmm. Like, now what do all these other things mean, and what's actionable in there? That's the kind of thing that I'm really excited to learn more about and be better at, is having this just wide swath of information and picking it through. And I think a lot of that is just going to be continuing to ask other people that have already kind of done that work and standing on their shoulders a little bit, and just being better at that while still, making wine in your own way a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so it's I feel like I'm still scratching the surface in that regard, and for us too. I think it's what I really like. I found now working at a number of different places is most of my friends are teachers and nurses, and they're just so buying wine is a splurge, for the most part, and so I love being at a spot where we have a wide range of wines, and I've enjoyed that at other places too, where you have wine where a $20 bottle of wine or $25 bottle of wine is a big deal to buy for most people, and it's not just like so I find a lot of pride, and it's really important to me to make these wines that are accessible price point wise, but then also are really, they're better than that price value. So that's, if that is something that's always going to be really important to me. I have tons of respect for people that can just consistently put out $200 bottles. I love drinking Cayuse and Bordeaux's and stuff. Those are awesome wines. Anybody can give those to me. That's happily, we'll take those. But having the range of things, kind of getting better and better at producing these wines at an accessible price point is something that I just want to keep pushing the envelope on a little bit. I think especially in Oregon, we're seeing, we had such awesome growth for so long, and now there's a little bit of reverse pressure on prices a little bit, kind of bringing things down a little bit. And so just, simultaneously getting better at that, making our entry-level wine better and better and better, while keeping the price really low. And then at the same time, making these the anniversary wines, the wedding wines, make, or it's depending on your career path, your Tuesday wine, if you have a really great job. But making those wines, also, just stand out to be, as world-class as we can make them, is kind of, that's doing both paths at the same time is something that is really important for me to kind of keep pushing and keep getting better and better at.
I love that answer. That's great. I have a question here to tell us about the rainbow mugs.
Yeah, that's so the rainbow. We got a policy at Illahe where anybody, whether they're the industry or not, can bring a rainbow mug to Illahe and trade it for a bottle of wine. It's just a standing policy. It can be new, used. You can steal it from your great Aunt Sally's cupboard, however you want to get it in here. And so that's it's a fun little insider thing. Not everybody knows about it, not that we hide it, but to see when people come in, they're really excited. It turns out they're harder to find than I think you might think they're going to be. I mean, I feel like, especially when we first started looking, you go to Goodwill, you're like, I'm gonna find 4 of these, it's a bit of a hunt. So I think there's something to that, you're like, every time you're at a thrift shop or you're in a tourist shop someplace, you're looking for these different rainbow mugs, and so that's the only coffee mugs we use. And then during harvest, we out of the press, we only taste out of rainbow mugs too, which is a bit risky, because we also have, if you break a rainbow mug, it's a beer fine too. So there's a risk involved in that, and everybody's got their favorites. And so if you break, a Dolly Parton rainbow mug, it's a pretty hefty beer fine. There's some penalties involved in that, but yeah, that's just kind of, I feel like that's kind of the part of the thing that is a small little snippet of what kind of makes me excited about Illahe. So there's just so many of these little quirks that are just, it's not corporate wine. It's so far from it, it's a nice mashup of corporate wine and weirdo wine together. And so that's, we did have to change the policy, I should say, as a disclaimer. We did have to change the policy one year. We had an intern in 22 that after harvest, she did the math on it, and she was like, I can order all of these rainbow mugs. She had a custom sayings on them all. So I can order all these rainbow mugs on the internet for whatever the price was, and then I can come in and trade them for wine, and I'm going to come up in so she brought in 12 rainbow mugs, and we were, all right, we'll give you those ones, but then after this, you can't custom make your own rainbow mugs anymore. But so I get distributors will come by, they'll hear about it, so we'll occasionally get one from Memphis or from Nevada or wherever. People will just be like, oh, I found this one, I'm excited to bring it into you. So it's a nice connection with everybody a little bit.
You talked a little bit about kind of some of the growth you've seen in the Oregon wine industry. Tell me a little bit about kind of initial impressions of the wine industry here. What has grown and changed? What does the industry look like to you today at the end of 2025?
Yeah, I think it's, I think in general, people are very open. And that's been something that I think is, it's a little weird, because I live in Salem, which is, for those of you that live in Portland, that's about 40 miles south of you. But I mean, we're on a little bit of an island over there, so it's different than when we living in Mac. We used to live in McMinnville for a while, and you're a little bit out on an island away from the wine industry a little bit, and so our forays are a little bit more scheduled into the wine industry a little bit. But I mean, entering it, I find that I just am so appreciative of how open book everybody is. Whether or not you know them or not has been, it's so helpful. And I think it's such a refreshing thing. I mean, 2020 was the most stark example of that, where you could just call everybody. But then also, every single year that we've ever had a problem, I've just you pick up the phone and call somebody, or after harvest, you go around and taste. And I just love that there's no trade secrets in that. I've had, talking to friends that have worked for other industries, they sign NDAs and the whole 9 yards. It's a different element here a little bit. And I think the other thing I like about it too is, I think it's an Oregonian thing. I think it's just there's just a lot of humbleness, I guess, in the States. I think in all regards. I think about it, especially thinking about the outdoor industry a little bit. In Colorado, everybody would tell you exactly what 14er they climbed and how many times they went skiing this year. And you come out here and people are like, "What'd you do this weekend?" "I went for a hike." "What'd you go?" "I don't know, in the forest over there." It's just like you're just doing things. It's not you doing anything because you love it. You're not bragging about it or anything like that. And I think there's a huge crossover to that in the wine industry too, where when I talk to people, like, this is the way we do it. It seems to work. Like, how do you do it? And I think, and I'm like, what you're talking about. You're playing that off, but like, there's a lot of thought that went into this, and this wine that you made is really awesome. And so that's something that is, I just find really encouraging, and I think these like Pinot technical tasting experiences where there just is a little bit of a, raise all the ships a little bit by everybody making better wine is great. You see that in the market too. I love that. Whenever you run into somebody, I just ran into David from Bryn Mawr at the store the other day, and he's like, "Oh, we see your wine all over the place." Like, and I'm like, "Oh yeah," like we just, and I think everybody, when you're out and about, you're talking about your own stuff, and then the next sentence out of your mouth is like, "Oh, you like this one? You should go try so and so's. Theirs is really good too." Like, and I think that's awesome. Everybody here kind of wants everybody else to succeed, and that's something that is, I think, just is such a great. I don't know. It's just so encouraging, and it's a really makes me never want to leave Oregon, to be honest with you.
Well, on that note, tell us about what's next for you. Anything on your horizon that you're excited about, personally or professionally? Anything you haven't done yet that you want to do?
I think, I love being at Illahe, and so I just see so much runway ahead of where we're going. I see so much runway ahead of Oregon in general that I'm just excited to kind of keep pushing and seeing what's possible a little bit. I think the winery space here was designed for 8,000 cases. So, we did the 25,000 cases the one year, which was too much, but it was too much. But just keep pushing those things, kind of pushing the boundaries and kind of seeing what that next step looks like a little bit, because I think a lot of it is we don't know, and I think is being open to those things. And I think, I think a couple years ago, everybody in the industry, you couldn't sell, your $40, $50 bottle of wine was what was moving, and it was moving so quickly, and it was, okay, cool, like let's put all of our eggs into this basket. And now it's switched, and now everybody wants a glass pour wine or a really market-friendly thing, and, and just not being, just being open to those changes a little bit. And I think that's a lot of what I kind of envision for us over the next, and myself for the next, 5-10 years, is just being, just making the best examples of whichever pathway that is, and I'm pretty open to going on different directions like that. The other thing that I feel like is really exciting too is playing around with different varietals a little bit as well. I mean, obviously we have the stalwarts as far as varietals in the States, but what drew me initially to Illahe, he was like, oh, like Willamette Valley Viognier and a Gruner, like, oh, cool. Like, so now, especially now we have more acreage coming online, is let's keep playing around and planting different things, and that's, I think that is something that can keep you really excited. I made an Albarino from Willamette Valley last year. We have the Tempranillo Rosé. I think not all of those things are, home runs every single time. When I started, that we had Lagrigne planted. I hated it. And that was fine. We made it a couple times, and now we switched it over, and now we're trying, these Scopatinos and Terraldegos, and I think that's, I think Pinot is still, what we're going to be doing, but I think it's just anything to keep yourself excited and playing around and trying different things is what I want to continue doing, that's I think there's just a lot of opportunity for that at the moment.
All right, last question for you. Tell me about proudest accomplishment, greatest achievement. What are you proudest of so far in your life, in your career?
Let's see here. Well, I'm a crier, so I'm gonna like try to like go around like anything that's gonna get me waterworksy a little bit. But I mean, my kids are my most important thing. But then and then it's been really fun too, like introducing them to wine a little bit as well. They come in and I see how I'm doing it. But it's fun when they come in and they help out with the wine. So it's really important to them. They're at school and they tell their friends like, oh, I make wine. I make wine with my dad. And that's really cool. They're out there. They ride the horses. As they're coming up with the grapes. And just kind of continuing. That's what gets me the most excited. Is doing something and being able to share that experience with them. And that's definitely my proudest thing.
Excellent. All right. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't talk about today that you're hoping to talk about?
I think. Well, I talked for a while, so I would hope that I covered it all. But I guess I'm just really glad to be out here. I think so much of it is there's so much chance involved in life as far as like what pathways you go down and whether those things fit you and whether you like it or not. And I think I just feel really lucky that I found something that I'm excited about in a place like Oregon that's growing and is like and is really continuing to evolve, and I happen to be able to do it every single day. I think it's just is a lucky thing for sure.
Awesome, I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. Thanks for sharing your story with us on this very, very rainy December day. We appreciate you taking the time and being part of our project, and we'll let you off the hook.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.